Peace, everybody. What's going on? So, straight up, forgive me for the technical professionalism of the site at the moment. The editing, you have to forgive me. There's a lot of technical issues, but the word has to get out. And the word has to get out by any means necessary. The reason being, look, I don't fault athletes. Athletes are busy, they're honing their skills, but the people in their circles, in their corners, need to be looking out for their best interest. Regardless of whatever political leanings, people have to open up their eyes. Like Cantor, Gobert, these guys are brave, but they got to be careful. Don't want these guys to make themselves examples, you know, victims. You understand what I'm saying? People, people, people have to really like look at the 1,000 pound gorilla in the room. You know what I mean? You can't land someplace and the place looks like a episode of the Squid. It looks like the Squid Games when you land. You know, your bartender is a robot, your waiter is a robot, your ticket agent's a robot. Like no human interaction. Like what's up with that? But again, I'm going to show you something, and you have to ask yourself, why is this not all over the news? Like, I send this to people who I consider influential people because they can get that information out. And I hope so because this is, I don't want to use the word sinister, because there has to be some complicit. People have to be complicit for this to work. There's so many moving pieces. All right, the 2-minute mark. Let's go. And again, the message, ignore the messenger.
Ben Harnwell in Rome. Ben, get us up to date on exactly what's going on over there.
Good morning, Steve. Well, it's not only NBC, which is in full-on panic mode right now, but also the CCP itself in Beijing, as every last pretense of controlling their COVID outbreak now collapses in front of our eyes. And we know this is happening. We know that their official narrative has collapsed by the way that they subtly invert it from one moment to the next. So I'm just going to give a brief rundown now of exactly how this crisis has developed and then frame today's events in the context of this changing narrative. So first of all, back in December, we were talking about the outbreak that they had in Xi'an City, when the world basically just made a few references in the press and then moved on. And the CCP said, don't worry, folks, it's not going to reach Beijing. Well, then a couple of weeks later, it reached Tianjin port on the border of Beijing, and the CCP said, don't worry, folks, we've got this triple locked, closed loop bubbles, the most secure separation mankind's ever seen. Even if COVID arrives in Beijing city itself, it won't enter the closed loop. Now what has happened,
So what?
in this total inversion of the reality, Steve, is that they are now saying, and this is the story, that the conflagration of virus inside the bubble is so bad, the CCP is telling citizens of Beijing, don't worry, this is contained within the bubble and it won't be escaping. They've even changed. You remember a week or so ago, Steve, we pointed out that the fear of the outbreak, which was already raging in Beijing itself, was so bad. They'd said that should a car crash occur between the hotel and a stadium or a venue of the Olympics, that ordinary Chinese people shouldn't go to the aid of any athletes injured in an incident to stop the spread from Beijing into the closed loop. Then now the spin on this in China has now inverted 100%. The reason they're not allowed to go to the aid of anybody who is potentially injured in a car crash is to not infect Beijing with this virus that is raging out of control. So how bad, Steve, is it raging out of control? In the last 11, 12 days, the CCP now declares, and obviously these figures are fictional, but they give it an indication, 353 people now who are games participants are now have been declared positive And if you want to know what the proportion of that is, as we discussed yesterday, the 11 participants who are now hospitalized because of this, it's about 3%. Now, here's the threat, Steve, because in 2 weeks' time, once this virus has raged its way through, everyone's going to be leaving Beijing and then going back to their homes in the West. And as we've been pointing out, this is right now in the moment of phasing out the lockdown and the COVID controls. What is this percentage? It's 3%, right? And we're not talking about octogenarian with comorbidity. We're talking about the fittest people on the face of the planet in hospital right now. We don't know what the variant is, but it's not Omicron, or if it is Omicron, it seems to be as contagious as Omicron, but significantly more damaging. And this, as we said right along, Steve, we've been pioneering the world coverage on this. This is going to be these COVID Squid Games. It's the largest super spreading event in mankind's history.
But here's what's outrageous, because the CCP does this all the time, and I want to make sure the audience understands. In the information warfare part of this, what's important is that at first the bubble was to keep everything out. Now that it's inside the wire, they've actually flipped it and said, we're just going to keep it inside the bubble. And the world's media just kind of reports that. They don't say, well, hang on for a second. You guys are inverted what the plan was, because you couldn't. It's obviously coming from a PLA weapons lab in Wuhan and others' weapons labs. You can't control it over there. And now they got 3%. This is the buried lead, is how they've inverted it. You've done an amazing job of this. Ben, also, we got to bounce it. Is Frank Gaffney up? Okay, fine. Because I'm going to have to move on here, because I've got so much stuff to go through. Ben, here's the thing, is that you've got there's even more serious breaking news coming out of there. G News and GTV have got it. You're going to put it up on Getter Day about maybe even some of the delegations are infected, like the Russian delegation. There's certain hotels that we're getting reports from people there firsthand through G News and GTV that there may be high infection rates of the international community that came over that weren't as prepared as by the domestic. You're going to be putting that up on your Getter account throughout the day.
I am, Steve. This is going to probably be the biggest breaking story that I've ever published on Getter. And here's the implication, right? There were world leaders gathered together, not as many as the CCP had hoped, because a number have backed out, but there are going to be presidents and prime ministers and diplomatic missions here in Beijing with this COVID crisis raging out of control. And it is only going to be a question of time before we see presidents and heads of government joining athletes in Beijing General Hospital ICU. That is the fear. It's a very realistic fear. Now, I'm doing some double checking on this story that I'm going to be putting onto my Getter feed later. It is an astonishing, terrifying story, which Miles Groh has led on.
Okay, we're gonna link to that later. You're gonna put it up later.
So when Pelosi gets on TV and tells athletes, right, that they should not speak up when they go there, and they give us crap here about freedom of speech, but then athletes cannot go there and say anything so that they don't end up missing, which means you say the wrong thing there, you end up missing. But they were here saying that if you say something wrong about someone, that this person is that person. And this is where they're going to have the games. This is where all these sports leagues have business ties, a place there. If you say something they disagree with, you end up missing. Rudy Gobert and Enes Kanter have to be careful, you know. Now, on the flip side, people got to be careful about getting swabbed over there. A lot happens when you swab. A lot can be done when you saliva swab. Not just testing, but, you know what I mean? Ancestry stuff. You heard? Come on, y'all.